Welcome to Relic of Stories, a place where time folds into shadow and forgotten legends breathe once more. Here, we wander through ancient ruins, whisper through lost scrolls, and trace the footsteps of warriors, kings, and ghosts. Every story is a doorway, every voice a remnant of something the world tried to forget. So dim the lights. Settle in and let the past speak to you. One haunting tale at a time. Chapter 1. The Eleusinian Mysteries. Greece's sacred Alliance. Let us begin our journey not in darkness, but in twilight, that sacred hour between day and night, when shadow and light seem to whisper secrets to one another. It is in this liminal space that the story of the Eleusinian mysteries begins. In ancient Greece over 2,000 years ago, there, nestled just 14 miles northwest of Athens, lay the quiet town of Eleusis, a place whose name was spoken with reverence, awe, and absolute secrecy. To speak openly of the mysteries was forbidden. To reveal their rites was punishable by death. Yet, despite the silence, thousands made the pilgrimage each year. Statesmen, philosophers, poets, even emperors all walked the sacred way from Athens to Eleusis. What called them? What hidden truth compelled such devotion across centuries? The Eleusinian mysteries revolved around the myth of Demeter and Persephone, a tale of loss, death, and rebirth. Demeter, goddess of grain and fertility, wept as her daughter Persephone was taken to the underworld by Hades. Her sorrow turned the earth barren. Only when Persephone returned for part of the year did crops grow again. It was a cycle that mirrored the seasons and something deeper, the mystery of life, death, and what might come after. But this myth was only the surface. Beneath it lay a ritual so powerful, so transformative, that even Plato claimed it allowed one to contemplate the true source of being. Initiates from slaves to kings emerged from the Telesterion, the sacred hall of Eleusis, profoundly changed. What they saw inside has never been recorded, not because it was lost, but because it was never written. It was lived, breathed, and then guarded within the soul. The journey began with fasting, purification, and offerings. A procession carried sacred objects across the dusty road from Athens to Eleusis. Along the way, the initiates stopped at the river Cephasus to wash themselves, not just in water, but in intention to leave behind the ordinary world. For 9 days, the city was overtaken by ritual. There were torch-lit dances, secret hymns, and the cry of Iacchus echoing through the night. Iacchus, a mysterious figure linked to Dionysius, was both guide and guardian. His name burned in the minds of the initiates as they approached the Telesterion, the Hall of the Mysteries. There, in a vast stone chamber, thousands gathered in silence. Inner ritual, the epopteia, or vision, was performed by a high priest known as the Hierophant. Only he knew the sacred truths. Flanked by priestesses and bearing the ancient relics, he unveiled the secret drama. Some say it involved a glowing ear of grain. Others whisper of fire that did not burn. But none truly know. All we have are echoes. One Roman writer, Cicero, wrote, "Athens has given nothing nobler to the world than the mysteries of Eleusis. They soften the harshness of death." What does it mean to soften death? Perhaps the ritual offered more than comfort. Perhaps it offered initiation into the eternal. The Greeks did not view death as an end, but a transition, and the mysteries promised a glimpse beyond that veil. Even the philosopher Epictetus, A Stoic who believed in restraint and detachment hinted that Eleusis gave him something more enduring, a sense of belonging to the cosmos, of being part of a cycle greater than suffering or glory. But time, like all mortal things, is not kind dot with the rise of Christianity and the fall of pagan Rome. The mysteries came under attack. Theodosius I, a Christian emperor, outlawed all pagan practices in the 4th century A.D. The Telesterion was destroyed, the rites ceased, and the sacred flame, kept alive for centuries, flickered out. But the silence did not. Even now, centuries later, scholars and mystics still wonder what truly happened inside that stone hall. Was it a psychedelic experience using the kykeon, a barley-based drink that may have contained ergot? Was it a symbolic rebirth staged with drama and divine light? Or was it something beyond explanation, something that cannot be reduced to chemicals or rituals? What is known is that those who entered Eleusis emerged transformed. Their eyes held something ancient. Their voices carried a stillness that does not come from silence, but from awe. And though the temple has crumbled and the priests are dust, the question remains, what truth did they glimpse? And why was it so powerful, so beautiful, that it could never be spoken aloud? That is the heart of the Eleusinian mysteries. Not a religion, not a doctrine, but an encounter, a meeting between human and divine, cloaked in torchlight, hidden behind stone. A whisper that still echoes if you walk the ruins of Eleusis and listen very carefully. Perhaps even now the mysteries are not dead, only sleeping. Let us now open the 2nd chapter, stepping further into the shadows of antiquity, where the line between ecstasy and madness begins to blur. This is the story of the Dionysian mysteries, a ritual unlike any other, where divine intoxication replaced silent prayer, and the soul was not soothed, but shaken awake, here in the wild, fragrant groves of ancient Thrace and the rocky vineyards of Greece. Something strange and sacred once pulsed in the moonlight. It was not a temple built of marble, but a gathering under stars. It was not led by solemn priests in linen robes, but by women with ivy in their hair, hands painted with wine and eyes alight with frenzy. They were the Maenads, the chosen of Dionysus, god of wine, ecstasy, theater, and sacred chaos. To understand the Dionysian mysteries is to leave behind order and step willingly into divine disorder, where the Eleusinian rites whispered secrets. Through silence, the Dionysian rites screamed truth through celebration. For centuries they existed in the periphery, never fully accepted by the Athenian elite, yet never fully suppressed, because they offered something forbidden and vital, freedom from the self. The origin of Dionysus is itself a mystery. Was he, born in Thebes, torn apart and reborn in fire? Was he a foreign god from Phrygia or India, arriving with tigers and cymbals? Wherever he came from, he came to shatter the ordinary, and that is exactly what the mysteries offered. Participants known as Bacchantes or Bacchics prepared for days. They fasted, they drank honeyed wine, they danced until sweat and tears blurred their vision. Some wore fawn skins and held the thyrsus, a sacred staff twined with ivy. Drums and flutes guided them through the forests, deeper and deeper, until they reached the place of no return, not a physical place. A state of being. This was ecstasis, a word from which we get ecstasy, but which means to stand outside oneself, to dissolve the ego, to become not oneself but everything in that moment. The Bacchic initiate could feel the heartbeat of the cosmos. They could laugh and weep and scream and love with the fury of gods. The social roles they wore by day wife, slave, senator, soldier were stripped away. All were equal under Dionysus, who broke the chains of custom as easily as vines break stone. But it was not mere revelry. The Dionysian mysteries were a spiritual revolt. In a world dominated by order, hierarchy, and reason, Dionysus was the god who reminded mortals they were also beasts, stars, dust, and dream. He offered not escape, but confrontation. To face the chaos within, and to dance with it rather than deny it. In Euripides' tragedy, the Bacchae, the playwright dares to show both the glory and terror of the Dionysian rites. King Pentheus, who mocks the god and spies on the women, is torn limb from limb by his own mother, possessed by the spirit of Dionysus. Is it a warning against pride? A parable about repression? Or is it an invitation to humility? We do not know exactly what the secret rites included. They were not written down. Some scholars believe there were sacrificial feasts, symbolic deaths and rebirths, perhaps even ritual hallucinations induced by wine, dance, and natural herbs. But what is known is this: those who entered the mysteries came out changed. Roman historian Livy noted that the rites were suppressed at times, especially in Rome, where their intensity and power made lawmakers nervous. In 186 BCE, the Roman Senate issued the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, a decree that banned the Bacchanalia across Italy. The reason? Fear. Fear that people would abandon their roles, their duties, their logic, and perhaps they were right to fear, because Dionysus did not care for walls or borders. He did not care for rules written by men. His was a truth written in flame and laughter, in wild eyes and broken chains. Yet even as the Bacchanalia faded, even as the rites were absorbed or destroyed by empires and churches, their echoes endured, in theater, in poetry, in every festival, where people dance until dawn, in every cry of joy that rises above structure, in every artist who risks madness to make something beautiful. The Dionysian mysteries remind us that sacredness is not always silent, clean, or orderly. Sometimes it is loud, it is messy, it is terrifying, and it is real. So if you find yourself someday standing under the moon, hearing a distant drumbeat in your chest, and feeling like you might vanish into the stars, perhaps Dionysus is near, and perhaps even now the dance continues. For madness, when holy, is another name for awakening, and ecstasy, when embraced, is simply the soul remembering how to fly. Let us now descend into the stone chambers, into the candlelit silence, into the shadows of empire. For our third chapter, we step into the secretive world of the cult of Mithras, a mystery religion that grew not in palaces or temples, but underground beneath the very streets of Rome. This is a story of whispered vows, bloodless sacrifices, and a god born from stone. It is a story buried under centuries of soil and secrecy, a ritual path walked by warriors, emperors, and men sworn never to speak of what they had seen. The origin of Mithras, the central figure of this cult, reaches far back beyond Rome too. The Indo-Iranian god Mithra, a divinity of contracts, oaths, and light. But the Mithras worshipped by the Roman legions was not the old Persian deity. He was something transformed, reimagined to suit the soul of soldiers who lived and died by steel, loyalty, and code. What is known of this cult comes not from scripture, but from symbols. No sacred texts survive, no doctrine remains. Instead, archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of Mithraean subterranean temples built like caves. Each one holds the same central image: Mithras, clothed in Persian garb, slaying a cosmic bull. The Tauroctony, as this scene is called, is more than art. It is a spiritual equation. The bull, pierced in the neck by Mithras' blade, bleeds life. From its blood springs wheat, from its tail grapes. A dog, a snake, a raven all attend the killing, and always above them the stars watch. It is a ritual of death and rebirth, sacrifice and salvation. But what did it mean to those who gathered in these stone rooms? To enter the cult of Mithras was to become part of a hidden brotherhood. The rites were secret, divided into 7 grades of initiation: the raven, the nymphus, the soldier, the lion, the Persian, the heliodromos, and at the highest, the father. Each stage tested the spirit, the will, and the devotion of the initiate. These were not theatrical rituals. They were immersive experiences. Fires burned in altars. Bloodless offerings were made. Sacred meals shared. Often, the rituals involved simulations of cosmic journeys. The soul would symbolically ascend through planetary spheres, shedding impurities, seeking union with the light beyond. But the most powerful aspect of the Mithraic mysteries was the bond it forged. In an empire fractured by class, language, and politics, the Mithraeum was a sanctuary of unity. There, a centurion might kneel beside a common foot soldier, rank dissolved before the divine. And make no mistake, this cult was for soldiers. It spread through the Roman legions like wildfire. From Britannia to Syria, wherever the army went, Mithraea followed. Hidden behind taverns, beneath bathhouses, inside fortresses. Why did soldiers revere Mithras? Because he embodied their world. He was disciplined, resilient, radiant with inner fire. He fought cosmic darkness not with prayer, but with sword and strength, and he demanded the same of his followers. Yet for all its reach, the cult of Mithras left no written defense when Christianity rose to dominance. No evangelists, no martyrs, no scriptures. It simply faded, absorbed or destroyed by the faith that would claim the empire. Still, it left behind clues. In 1954, beneath a church in Rome, workers discovered a Mithraeum perfectly preserved, the central Tauroctony intact, side benches worn by knees, charcoal marks still on the altar, a temple beneath a temple, a god beneath a god. Scholars still debate the meaning of the bull slaying. Was it agricultural allegory? Astronomical code? Some believe Mithras represented the sun, conquering the constellation Taurus. Others see it as the soul conquering the beast within, but perhaps the meaning was never meant to be fixed. Perhaps the magic was in the mystery itself. In a time when the empire demanded conformity, Mithras offered sacred secrecy. In a world of surface power, he offered inner transformation, not through sermons, but through silence. So if you ever walk through Rome, or London, or the Rhine Valley, and feel beneath your feet an echo, it may be the memory of a forgotten rite, a chamber lit by flickering flame, a god carved in stone, a silence that once echoed louder than all the empires of man. For Mithras has no tomb, no gospel, and no grave. Only stars, only stone, only the whispered oath of those who dared descend and rise again, changed. Let us begin again, as the ancients did, by walking a sacred path from the dusty streets of Athens to the silent fields of Eleusis. This chapter unveils a ritual so sacred that death was promised to any who dared speak of it. The Eleusinian mysteries, the heart of ancient Greek spiritual life, were practiced for nearly 2,000 years, yet their secrets remain intact, not by accident, but by reverence. These were not rituals of conquest or fear, but of life, death, and rebirth rooted in the story of a mother's grief and a daughter's return. The myth that underpins the Chavín mysteries is the tale of Demeter and Persephone. Persephone, daughter of the harvest goddess Demeter, was taken by Hades to the underworld. In her grief, Demeter caused the earth to wither, crops to fail, and humanity to suffer. Only when Persephone was returned partially, cyclically, did the world bloom again. This cycle of descent and return mirrored the experience of every initiate. What they underwent was called a passage, from ignorance to understanding, from darkness to light. The journey began in Athens. Each year, thousands gathered to walk the sacred road to Eleusis. Along the way they fasted, carried torches, and sang hymns to Demeter and Persephone. They passed through sacred sites, each a symbol of transition, until at last they reached the Telesterion, the great hall where the deepest rites occurred. What happened inside remains one of history's most carefully kept secrets. We know that it involved a night vigil. We know that initiates drank a special potion, possibly made of barley and mint, perhaps laced with a psychoactive fungus. We know that something was shown to them, a sacred object, a revelation. It was said that after the mystery, death no longer held fear. Cicero, the Roman philosopher and statesman, called the mysteries the most exceptional and divine thing Athens has produced. He claimed they taught not just how to live, but how to die. The mysteries were open to anyone, man or woman, slave or citizen, so long as they had not committed murder. This inclusivity was radical, and in that darkened chamber, status dissolved. Only the soul mattered. Initiates left transformed. Some wept, some laughed, some spoke of visions of eternal light, and yet no one ever broke the vow, not in 2,000 years. Not under pain of torture. Not even under empire. Even as Christianity rose, even as temples were burned and pagan rites outlawed, the mysteries survived for a time. But in the 4th century A.D., the Roman Emperor Theodosius outlawed all pagan rituals. The sanctuary was desecrated, the sacred objects gone. The last high priest of Eleusis, Nestorius, was executed, and with him the rites ended. But the silence remained. In modern Eleusis, little survives above ground. Yet beneath the soil, archaeologists have uncovered fragments, the foundations of the Telesterion, remnants of torches, inscriptions bearing the names of initiates, whispers in stone. Some researchers speculate that the Eleusinian drink, the kykeon, was a hallucinogenic brew, that the revelation was a mystical experience brought on by chemistry and belief. But that view misses the point. What made the mysteries sacred was not what was seen, but how it was held. It was a ceremony of trust, of surrender, of transformation, through story. In a world of shifting empires and violent gods, the Eleusinian mysteries offered something quieter, a seed planted in darkness, a journey underground, and the promise that no winter lasts forever. So remember this. In the heart of Greece, in fields where barley once swayed under moonlight, thousands once stood together in sacred stillness. They faced the unknown, and they returned with peace. Let us begin this chapter with caution, for the subject is not merely of the past, but lingers, breathing quietly in the margins of modern history. The Order of Nine Angles, or Ona, is unlike the ancient cults that faded with time. It is a modern, secret society cloaked in archaic language and medieval ritual, whispered to have touched the darkest corners of the occult and ideology. Unlike the Rosicrucians or the Freemasons, whose rituals aimed for enlightenment or order, the Ona appears to embrace chaos. They claim descent not from ancient Greece or Mesopotamia, but from forgotten pagan sects in pre-Christian Britain, though scholars often debate whether this claim is fact or fabrication. What is clear is that the order arose in the late 20th century, rooted in British esotericism, and has since mutated through Zion's underground texts and coded manifestos. It promotes a philosophy known as sinister tradition, a path of personal evolution through forbidden acts, moral transgression, and spiritual isolation. Their rituals are designed not for comfort, but for confrontation. Practitioners undergo what they call insight roles, embedding themselves in hostile environments, even extremist groups, as a form of psychological and spiritual alchemy. It is dangerous territory, and the boundary between symbol and reality often blurs. The Order's core texts speak of ancient gods not as metaphors, but as entities known as the dark gods who exist in realms beyond human comprehension. Rituals involve invocations, runes, and sacrificial symbolism, though whether actual sacrifices occurred remains unconfirmed. The group's public face is often a mask, and beneath it, interpretations vary wildly. One of the most chilling aspects of the Order is their concept of the Sevenfold Way, a spiritual path involving years of esoteric study, wilderness, solitude, and encounters with the taboo. Those who survive the final trial, called the Grade of Ipsissimus, are said to transcend morality itself. Few have reached it. Few would want to. The Order's connection to extremist ideologies and violent fringe groups has brought it to the attention of law enforcement and scholars alike. Some believe it never existed in the form it claims, only as a myth, a provocation, a mind game. Others argue it is real, decentralized, and dangerously seductive to those lost between belief and identity. Documents tied to the Order have surfaced on obscure forums, hidden behind layers of encryption. Initiates sometimes speak in riddles, blending Sumerian mythology with quantum theory, Nietzschean ethics with blood rites. The language is dense. The meaning? Intentionally elusive. And yet, despite controversy and investigation, the Ona continues to drift beneath the cultural radar, neither fully disbanded nor ever truly exposed. To speak of the Order is to invoke a ghost with many faces. Scholars warn against reading its texts unprepared, as they are crafted to destabilize, to invite the reader into a labyrinth. What we know is fragmentary, but the feeling it leaves is unmistakable. A chill, a shadow, a question that has no answer. The Order of Nine Angles may not be ancient, but its methods are older than we'd like to admit. Methods of secrecy, of myth-making, of drawing power from fear. So if you ever stumble upon a weathered manuscript bearing strange geometric symbols, or a forum post written in archaic English referencing hidden rites under the crescent moon, perhaps walk away, because some knowledge once touched reshapes the soul, and the order does not forget. Now we turn our eyes to the Mesopotamian cradle, where dusted mountains cradle ancient beliefs and forgotten gods. This is not a myth carved on a lost stone, nor a legend buried by conquest. It is a living ritual, older than most religions, preserved by the Yazidi people. Their sacred scripture, the Black Book, speaks in veiled riddles and radiant flames. The Yazidis, often misunderstood, have long been targets of persecution and distortion. Their belief in Melek Taus, the peacock angel, has led to centuries of false accusations and brutal violence. But buried beneath those labels lies a truth so complex, so mystical, that even scholars admit we do not fully understand it. Their rituals begin with fire. Each year, in Lalish, the holiest Yazidi site, nestled in the valleys of northern Iraq, pilgrims gather barefoot. They come to kiss the sacred threshold, to light olive oil lamps, to wash in sacred springs, and to dance before the eternal flame. The temple, darkened by centuries of soot and sorrow, glows with the light of thousands of offerings. Inside this flame, they say, lives memory. The Black Book, also known as Mashaf Reish, is not a book in the traditional sense. It's a series of oral transmissions, glyphs, and scrolls passed down by the spiritual elite of the Yazidi caste system. Many versions have been lost. Some were hidden in walls. Others were burned. And yet fragments remain. It speaks of 7 divine beings, echoes of ancient Mesopotamian gods who govern the cosmos under the guidance of Melek Taus. But this angel, unlike any known to Abrahamic faiths, is not fallen. He is exalted, cast down, only to rise again, proving loyalty through suffering. This tale, misinterpreted by outsiders, led to the Yazidis being branded as devil worshippers. But in truth, their rituals are about light, purification, and cosmic balance. The fire is not to burn, but to reveal, to strip away falsehood. Some ceremonies involve the tying of sacred knots, the pouring of water from clay jugs in exact patterns, or the singing of ancient hymns that have no written form, only remembered sound. At times a sacred bull is invoked. Other times the air is filled with feathers and salt. The most mysterious aspect is the role of the qualls traveling, hymn keepers who memorize the entire Yazidi oral tradition and pass it down unbroken through generations. These qualls are living archives, often blindfolded while reciting, to prevent distraction from divine rhythm. During the feast of Jamai, thousands of torches line the hillsides of Lalish. Pilgrims weep, chant, and light candles in every corner of the valley. The ground glows like a starlit sky. It is said that in those moments the veil between worlds thins, that Melek Taus watches. And that the flames whisper truths not meant for written pages. In 2014, during ISIS's genocidal campaign, thousands of Yazidis were slaughtered, and their sacred texts were targeted for destruction. temples were desecrated, qualls were executed. The Black Book was nearly lost, but not entirely. Some priests had hidden scrolls beneath sacred stones. Others fled to remote caves. One monk is said to have eaten fragments of the book to keep them from falling into enemy hands. In exile, Yazidis continue to perform their rites in secret. Digital archives now carry whispers of the hymns. A new generation of qualls is rising not in Lalish, but in Germany, Armenia, and even Canada. The fire still burns. The Black Book is less a text and more a ritualized memory, something felt, not read, and its fire rites remind us that not all sacred knowledge is meant for the public eye. Some truths are passed through tears and torche. And those who seek to erase such truths may find the flame rises again. In another valley beneath, another sky speaking the same ancient name, Melek Taus. Now let us travel to ancient Greece, not to the marble temples of Athens or the philosophical symposiums of Plato, but to a quiet plain near the village of Eleusis, where for over 2,000 years a ritual unfolded each autumn that no one dared speak of, not because it was forgotten, but because it was forbidden. The Eleusinian mysteries were among the most sacred and secret rites in all of classical antiquity. Even today, no one knows exactly what occurred within the inner sanctum. Initiates, from peasants to emperors, were sworn to silence under threat of death, not just punishment, but spiritual extinction. Yet echoes of their steps remain. The mysteries revolved around the myth of Demeter and Persephone, the goddess of the harvest, and her daughter stolen away by Hades to rule the underworld. The story explains the seasons, yes, but to the initiates it meant far more, a roadmap of life, death, and rebirth, a path through darkness into light. Each year, participants walked from Athens to Eleusis in a sacred procession known as the Hierophany. They bathed in the sea. They carried torches. They sang hymns known only to the initiated. At the temple, known as the Telesterion, they drank from a special cup called the Kykeon, believed to contain barley, mint, and possibly psychoactive substance derived from ergot, a fungus with hallucinogenic properties. And then the doors were closed. What happened next, no scroll tells us. Plato called it the soul's awakening. Aristotle hinted at a transformation beyond knowledge. The Roman historian Cicero said that through the mysteries one learns not how to die but how to live. Some accounts speak of a blinding light emerging from the darkness. Others mention sacred objects being revealed. There may have been a symbolic descent into Hades, followed by the triumphant return of Persephone. The ritual was not a story told, it was a story lived, and it left its mark. After initiation, many claimed to no longer fear death. The mysteries did not promise salvation. They revealed the sacred rhythm of the cosmos. The initiates were said to walk differently, speak differently, as though carrying within them a secret that changed the way they saw the world. For nearly 2,000 years, the rites continued. From the Mycenaean age through the Roman Empire, generation after generation took the silent oath. No wars stopped it. No empire dared interfere. Even Augustus himself bowed before its sanctity. But in 396 A.D., the temple at Eleusis was burned by the Christian general Alaric during the Gothic invasions. The priests were scattered, the initiates executed, the secrets lost. The telesterion now lies in ruined stones buried beneath olive groves and grasses, whispered over by the wind. Archaeologists have unearthed altars and ritual vessels, stone steps worn smooth by centuries of barefoot processions. But the central moment, the epoptea, the vision remains unknown. And maybe that's the point. In a world obsessed with revelation and spectacle, the Eleusinian mysteries remain sacred not because of what we know, but because of what we don't. They ask us to imagine a spirituality so profound it required no book, no sermon-only experience. Today, some spiritual seekers attempt to reconstruct the rituals, blending ancient hymns with psychedelic journeys. But the true mysteries, those kept by Demeter's chosen priests, were not meant for mass revival. They were meant to be lived once, then carried in silence. And in that silence, something eternal was born. The initiates are long gone. The torches, extinguished. But each autumn, when the leaves begin to fall, and the earth prepares for slumber, some say you can still feel it in Eleusis. A hush, a presence, as if something ancient is waiting to return, not as doctrine, but as a doorway, and beyond that doorway, light, not blinding, but illuminating. Now let us drift further back beyond the reach of European empires, beyond the great Andean roads of the Inca to the fog-choked rainforests of pre-Columbian Colombia. Here, high in the verdant mountains of what is now Mexico, legends still swirl about a lost priesthood, a sun cult, and a sacred rite that vanished beneath the earth, leaving no survivors and no successors. The Quillacinga were a fierce and spiritual people, known for their sky burials and blood-painted temples. They worshipped Inti, the sun god, but their practices differed from those of their neighbors. Their rituals were darker, older. Some archaeologists suspect the Quillacinga preserved remnants of an even more ancient civilization, one whose name has long been forgotten. According to oral accounts passed down by the Pasto and other indigenous groups, a hidden circle of high priests once led the Quillacinga. These priests were said to be born during eclipses, raised in seclusion, and trained from childhood to hear the voice of the sun through flame, stone, and smoke. Each solstice, a ceremony would take place deep in the cloud forest, where a stone, circle perfectly aligned with the movement of the sun, was hidden beneath moss and vines. It is said that only the initiated could find it, for the path shifted with the seasons, and the trees themselves seemed to protect it. The ceremony began at dawn. Drums pounded like thunder from the depths of the earth. Dancers, cloaked in jaguar pelts and golden masks, moved in spirals as priests chanted syllables never written down. At the center of the stone circle, a pillar carved with concentric suns was anointed with sacred oils, believed to channel the divine heat of Inti into the hearts of the believers. But the true rite happened in silence. The final stage was known as Inti Payana, the descent into light. The high priest would step onto the pillar and drink a potion brewed from the ayahuasca vine and an extinct orchid known only from legend. As he collapsed, eyes open but unmoving, the circle would chant a single name, the secret name of the Ujikart, name of the sun believed to hold the power to open portals between worlds. Then came the quake. One day, during the final Inti Payana, the ground beneath the stone circle cracked open. Witnesses few as they were claimed the light was blinding. Trees fell, the sky turned red, and the circle, along with all the priests and dancers, disappeared into the earth. No bodies were ever found. No stones recovered. Locals say the jungle closed itself around the wound. Vines grew in unnatural shapes. Birds refused to sing. Shamans still speak of a place called the Sun's Mouth, a forbidden zone where compasses fail and fire refuses to burn. Spanish conquistadors, hearing rumors of golden idols and secret rituals, sent soldiers to find this hidden temple. None returned. In 1986, a team of geologists surveying the Andes for seismic faults discovered a circular depression in the forest canopy, invisible from the ground. They attempted a descent. One radio transmission was received before the line went silent. It's carved. This wasn't made by nature. The team vanished. No further expeditions were allowed. Today, in villages near the Ecuadorian border, old women still trace the shape of the circle with their fingers when they pray. Children are told never to follow the birds that fly too straight. And sometimes only on the longest nights of the year, drums are heard echoing from the hills, fading just as quickly as they arrive. Some believe the circle was a doorway, and the Quillacinga priests were not lost, but taken, chosen, absorbed into the light they worshipped so faithfully. And in a forest where fire won't burn and the sun feels just a bit too close, who are we to say they were wrong? The stone circle remains buried, the chants unspoken, the orchid extinct. But the path to Intipayana may yet exist in dreams and flame and places where the sky opens too wide. Some doors, once opened, do not close. Some rituals, once begun, are never truly finished, and some secrets were never meant to be erased, only hidden in green shadows, waiting for someone who still remembers the sun's secret name. Chapter 9. The Bloodstone of the Chavín Seychelles. Let us now journey to a place where the air hangs heavy with mist, where the wind whispers through mountain passes like forgotten prayers. We travel deep into the Andes of ancient Peru, to a world older than the Inca and steeped in shadows and stone. Here, nestled in the highlands, existed a people who carved their beliefs into rock and breathed life into myth. These were the Chavín builders of temples, keepers of visions, and masters of sacred silence. The heart of their spiritual world lay in a temple complex known as Chavín de Hunter, a name that to this day invokes mystery and awe. Constructed over 2,000 years ago, this vast network of tunnels, plazas, and subterranean chambers was more than just architecture. It was an echo chamber for the divine. In its depths stood a single towering monolith, the Lanzan. This fanged deity, carved in stone and standing over 3 meters tall, was never meant to be admired in sunlight. It was hidden, veiled in darkness, placed where only initiates and shamans would dare tread. They called it the stone that drinks blood. Imagine yourself walking those darkened corridors, lit only by flickering torches. The walls hum with sound crafted by ancient engineers to amplify whispers and distort cries. The air smells of earth, herbs, and something metallic, something ancient. At the end of the corridor, the Lanzan emerges from the gloom like a god awakening. Its eyes are wide, its fangs bared, and around its base, shallow grooves funnel downward grooves that, it's believed, once carried blood. The Chavín rituals were shrouded in secrecy. performed in total silence, often under the influence of hallucinogenic brews made from the San Pedro cactus. These ceremonies weren't for the faint-hearted. Initiates were isolated, deprived of food, sleep, and light. As they wandered through the temple's narrow halls, the echoes distorted their senses. Disoriented and altered, they reached this chamber of the Lanzon, where their minds were said to merge with the spirit of the god. What they saw, what they heard, is lost to time. But when they emerged from that underworld, witnesses said their eyes were not the same. Their voices spoke in riddles. Their hands trembled as if they had touched something too sacred, too terrible, to name. It was said that the god within the stone had spoken to them, and now they carried fragments of that divine voice within. The priests believed the Lanzon wasn't just a symbol, but a living entity, a gateway between worlds. When blood was poured into its base, they said the stone pulsed, throbbed, as if it breathed. Some even claimed the face of the deity shifted when no one watched directly, as though adjusting to the dreams of its worshippers. In time, the Chavín vanished, not through war, not by conquest, but by something quieter. Their temples fell silent, their people scattered, and yet their presence lingered not in scrolls or chronicles, but in stone. Centuries later, in the 20th century, archaeologists began unearthing Chavín de Huántar. They found the Lanzon still standing, untouched, deep in the central cruciform chamber. Around it, carved jaguars, serpents, and birds swirled in sacred geometry. The builders had designed the space not just for ritual, but for transformation. Researchers notice something strange: the acoustics. A whisper spoken in one hallway echoed clearly in another, even when the speaker was 100 feet away. Some frequencies were amplified, others silenced. It was as if the temple itself chose what should be heard and what should remain secret. But something else was found in the grooves near the base of the Lanzon. Mineral analysis revealed trace elements of iron and copper materials found in blood. The channels weren't merely decorative. They had carried something warm, something vital. Still, no written texts remained. The Chavín left no books, no scrolls, only symbols carved into stone, abstract and animalistic, almost impossible to decipher. But among the iconography, recurring motifs appeared: duality, transformation, and vision. Eyes always eyes, watching, seeing, revealing. And then came the stories from locals. Farmers living near the site spoke of nights when the ground seemed to vibrate beneath their homes. Shepherds avoided the ruins after dusk, claiming to hear distant humming, like a chant in a language too old to remember. One man, a guide, refused to enter the Lanzon chamber, saying he had once stepped too close and dreamed of fangs for weeks. In 1975, a group of students reported the Lanzon had moved, not much, just a tilt. When archaeologists returned days later, it stood upright, unmoved. No record of earthquakes, no sign of disturbance. So the legend continued. The Lanzon, they say, is not just stone. It remembers, it waits. And in our world obsessed with reason, there is still a place in the high Andes where silence rules, where whispers become prophecy, and where a god of stone may still thirst in darkness. Even now, pilgrims visit the site. Not tourists, but seekers. They bring offerings, small things, feathers, coins, water. They leave them near the sealed chamber. They don't speak, they listen, and some return claiming they heard a voice in the dark, not with ears, but with something deeper, a sensation, a pulled dot as though the stone had reached out and touched them back. Whether myth or memory, hallucination or holiness, the bloodstone of the Chavín still stands, watching, waiting, for the next voice brave enough to answer, for the next soul, willing to listen. And as long as it stands, the Chavín will never be truly gone. They are carved into the bones of the mountain. Alive in silence, awake in stone. Forever. Chapter 10. The Crownless Kings of Benin. Lost magic of the Bronze Siesti Ars. Let us move now to the blazing red earth of West Africa, where the skies hang heavy with heat and memory, where time moves differently among the ancient palaces, and the whispers of the past drift like incense over royal courtyards. This is the land of Benin, not the modern nation by that name, but the historical kingdom, once so powerful, so advanced, and so shrouded in sacred art that its legacy continues to both awe and unsettle those who dare to look closely. Today, we descend into the mysteries of the Oba's artisans, the bronze casters of Benin, and a line of kings whose power was said to flow not only from blood and politics, but from rituals passed through fire, metal, and shadow. The Benin kingdom, located in what is now southern Nigeria, flourished from around the 11th century until the British invasion of 1897. In those centuries, its rulers, known as Obas, built a society of extraordinary complexity. It had wide boulevards, a moat system stretching for miles, and an urban planning structure that rivaled or even surpassed many European cities of its time. But more than roads or walls, Benin's true marvel was its art, particularly its bronzes. These were not mere decorative items. They were records. They were symbols. They were spells, some believe, cast not just in metal, but in power. The bronzes told the history of the kings, depicted sacred rituals, and were used to preserve ancestral spirits. These sculptures, crafted using the lost wax method, were far too sophisticated for outsiders to comprehend fully at the time. Some Europeans believed they could not have been made by Africans, and proposed wild theories of outside influence, none of which held true. But beneath their shimmering surfaces, some scholars whisper, lay something deeper, the secrets of divine right, sealed through centuries of ritual. Each Oba, it's said, was not just a ruler but a spiritual conduit, one whose legitimacy was affirmed through rites held in secrecy. By the Eigen Iron Mon, the Royal Guild of Bronze Casters, to become a master caster, one didn't just learn metallurgy. He fasted, he prayed, he slept among effigies. He walked into the forests alone, seeking signs from Alokun, the sea deity who is believed to guide the hands of those shaping bronze. During coronation seasons, when a new Oba was chosen, the guild would retreat into their shrine workshops for days. No one was allowed to enter. Smoke rose not just from fires but from incense, and it was believed that if a casting cracked during this period, the spirit of the new king would not be stable. But perhaps the most unsettling part of the Benin ritual system was the belief in human transformation. Bronze, after all, was eternal. The Oba was mortal. To bridge that gap, the bronzes were made with items from the king himself, hair clippings, a drop of blood, soil from his birth hut. These were mixed into the clay mold. The result? A sculpture not just of the Oba, But linked to him dot, it is said that when an Oba died, his likeness would be cast immediately, and that sometimes the sculptor would begin work before the death, working from dreams and omens dot in the 15th century. One particular bronze, known only as the face that sees both ways, depicted a king with two sets of eyes, one forward and one gazing behind. It was melted down during colonial purges, but the elders say it was the most powerful piece ever made dot it could bless crops, or cause famine, that it could summon rain or conjure sickness, and according to royal folklore, it was cast not with firewood, but with bones of traitors. The British looting of Benin in 1897 ended much of this sacred cycle. Thousands of bronzes were taken, now scattered across the museums of Europe. The palace was burned, the guilds scattered. But not all rituals were lost dot. In 2005, a mysterious bronze surfaced in Benin City. It had no known artist and seemed to show an Oba with his eyes closed, as if dreaming. It bore symbols of modern machinery, wheels, steam, even airplanes, though it was dated to the 1700s. Elders called it an omen. The king never sleeps, one said. So if he is dreaming, it means he's seeing a world yet to come. Since then, the bronze has been passed from shrine to shrine. No museum has dared claim it. Its base is said to be too hot to rest on stone, even though no heat can be detected by touch. Some believe it was the last true ritual bronze, the final, work of a master who cast not for kings, but for time itself dot. And if you walk the alleys near the old palace ruins today, children say that at dusk, when the red dust settles and the city falls quiet, you can hear it tapping metal on clay and see sparks with no flame. They say, the crownless kings are returning, not for thrones dot, not for war, but for memory dot, because in Benin, history was never written on paper dot. It was poured, cooled, polished, and placed on an altar. And though many of those altars were stolen, the spirits are still waiting. If our storytelling brought you peace tonight, if these echoes of history helped your mind drift softly into dreams, please consider subscribing to Relic of Stories. Your support lets us keep unearthing the forgotten, the mysterious, the unseen. Share these tales, leave a comment, or just return whenever you need a quiet voice in the dark. Until next time, sleep well and remember, not all who vanish are truly gone.